Welcome to Smokin Bulls, the podcast about business, money, and lifestyle. Today we're going to be speaking to Lori Power about being an author and writing books. My name's Tyler.
My name's Dave.
Let's get into it. We, of course, spoke to you before this meeting to find out, what interests you outside of work and outside of business. And so to begin, I guess, what are you passionate about outside of your benefits business?
I'm passionate about writing. If I were on a desert island and I could bring one thing, it doesn't even have to be a pen. It could be a pencil and a piece of paper. That's it. Like, super easy. People are often surprised because I come across like very much an extroverted, and only my family knows that, in this case, when the cameras are off or when I'm not meeting with somebody, like, it's super quiet. We have a very quiet household when we're not on, and that's it. So you can normally just find me writing.
That's good news, because once we've done about 15 of these podcasts, like I said, we should probably have book number 1 ready to go for somebody who wants to go through 25 hours of our video and write it for us. I guess you're never supposed to say that, right?
The technology, you can just get it transcribed. There's an app for that.
Yeah, we've looked, don't worry.
Yeah.
So how, and I guess when did you get interested in writing? Is it something you've always done since a child, or is it just a new passion of yours?
No, I've always written. I think I said what inspired my first story was the 1984 Olympics in California. And there was, anybody who remembers that Olympics, if you were alive, was there was a Swedish or Switzerland, and she wasn't last, but she had missed the last. They only allowed 5 hydration points, and she had missed the last one, and there was a heat wave in Los Angeles at the time. So by the time she made it to the stadium, she was all crippled up, but she kept going because she was super dehydrated. And she wouldn't let anybody touch her as she was making that last lap, because they would have disqualified her. And at this point, her motivation was just to get to that finish line. And she did. And I remember watching that, and that was the first story I ever wrote, was what does it take to keep going? That's what I wanted to know. And that's what I explored in the writing, is if it were me, would I have come into that stadium with all those people and just said, just take me over, I'm done? But she didn't. She just kept going. And if you ever have an opportunity to see that video, it'll make you cry, because I don't know how she made it around that lap.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I don't recall it. No, but I was only 5 or 6 years old. But it's
Oh,
something
thanks.
that might.
Oh, there you go.
Just rub it in.
I was 15, so that might put us closer.
we were the same age, Dave.
There we go. Okay. Us old people we'll talk about that then.
So, writing books can sometimes, I would think, from an outside perspective, because I've never written any books or anything like that, but it's a kind of a romantic, pastime. I think of it as being, wow, you can create a book from nothing, and it gets published, and then hundreds of thousands of people read it, and you make a movie from it, and it seems like a, very, almost a Hollywood, this kind of perspective is what I take on writing. You obviously do it because it's a passion of yours. So I would look at it like, geez, how do I get my movie made? So that's my.
You almost make me want to fall off my chair laughing, but
that's my myth.
Then write the book.
So I would assume that's one of the myths maybe that people have about writing. But what are some of the myths that you ran into, or what are myths about the topic of being an author that you would dispel?
Yeah, that is a myth, is the amount of time that goes into creating a book. It's not, I look at, when I'm writing, I write, first I look at bones on the page. I'm looking at a skeleton. All I want to do is to get that idea down. So right now I'm working on an idea. I've set it in 1947. I know it's going to be a railway murder. I know the person's name. I know he's only 14. He ran away from home. He staged his own death. And that's what I know. So I'm writing all of those bones out on the paper. Once I get that done, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put a little bit of meat on those bones, and I'm going to put a little bit of personality in there. Then I'm going to go back through it again. And now I'm going to add dialogue, and I'm going to add people, and I'm going to add situations and the environment. By the time I get a book ready to go to my publisher, I have probably written that story 7, 8, 10 times. And what I come across a lot of times is people go, well, I want to write. And then you take them, and I can only tell them my process. I mean, there's obviously Stephen Kings out there and Nora Roberts that are fantastic at what they do, and they probably don't need a day job like I do. But it is a process for me, and I don't mind spending the time. The time creates that passion. But I write specifically for me. So my first thing is, can I fall in love with that character? If I can fall in love with that character for me, and I write it for me, then chances are somebody else is going to like it. But what I did early on when I was young and in my 20s and thought I am just a heartbeat away from Oprah interviewing me, that was where, I was writing for an audience that never existed. And I would send stuff out and there'd be nothing but rejection letters. And the moment I wrote that first story for me that I would want to read, is the very first publisher took it.
Wow.
Cool.
So do you run away to a spot to write, or are you just, it's such a passion of yours that as you're doing your normal day, everyday thing, you got a book and you're just dropping stuff on that book as soon as it comes to your mind? Or do you have to take a certain time every once in a while and go hide from everybody in your family or your job and go take care of it?
I don't hide from people, but it doesn't impact my day to day. So I do compartmentalize. So my day is my day job, but where somebody might sit down and watch a TV show, I'm like, I've got it rolling in here, guys. I don't need Netflix, right? So that's my pastime. So I will sit with my family when they're watching their shows. But I don't hear the show. I'm just into my thing.
Good for you.
Makes it easy, because I mean, when we talk to anybody else about their avocation or what they're passionate about, I mean, some of these things cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So you probably have one of the least invasive type things that people can get involved in. I mean, unless you're a specific writer who needs to go to the top of some mountain and stay there for months on end at very high cost of living to live somewhere else. Other than that, the barriers to entry, there's not anything really stopping anybody from putting as you said, pencil in a piece of paper.
No. And I would never get rid of the day job, to be completely honest, because that's the fodder for the stories. I mean, there is like, I'll take one I wrote called Hit and Run. It was literally based on an event that happened to me. I was driving slowly. I came up to an intersection. I had the right of way. You know how you have the 2 stop signs on either side and then you have the right of way? Well, a guy ran the stop sign. I T-boned him and he ran. So it was so it sounds straightforward until you go to the cop shop. And then you have to explain, I hit the guy, but he ran. And the cop was there. And I had 2 little kids with me, and he was like, I don't get what you're saying. I'm like, okay, I had the right of way. He ran the stop sign and I hit him. And then he ran away. Like he drove his car away. No, I don't understand that. It was like an hour and a half at this cop shop. I walked away from that. I'm like, I got to write that down. That's too crazy.
It's a chapter right there. Look for the
that
car with chrome and blue paint.
Right under the bus.
That's right.
So if somebody's a writer like yourself, do you go somewhere for support or resources, or if somebody's starting writing, like how do they get involved in it? Like, is there a how-to book, a writing for dummies, or like what?
There's so many books. There's so many groups. There's a lot of shysters. There's a lot of people that'll take your money and you'll get nothing out of it. If you have to spend money, then a lot of people will self-publish, especially on fiction. I'm not a big fan of self-publishing. I think that if it's worth getting out there, it's worth it for a publisher to take it. Everything else is noise. And so it gets a little bit harder to get your stuff noticed with all of the self-publishing noise out there. My go-to is to belong to, there's the Writers Guild of Alberta. That would be your first and foremost. Canadian Writers Guild would be your second. Nothing but fantastic resources. I belong to to what we call a beta group. So a beta group is, and I belonged to them for years. They're from all over North America. So there's 2 in the United States, and there happens to be another one here in Canada, but in the eastern side of the country. And every week we just submit something to one another, and we give opinions on, have I pulled the reader out? Is my story flowing? And that kind of feedback is instrumental in making sure that you're staying on point, because there's a lot of things that are happening inside your head when you're writing, and it may not transcribe onto the paper. So I may be describing you, and I'm saying, well, you're sitting there, and this is what you're wearing. Tyler's wearing a gray suit jacket, and Dave has a beard. So they'll come back and they'll go, well, is he naked? Like, did you forget to tell us that he's wearing a blue jacket? So that's the purpose of a beta group. I highly recommend them.
Interesting.
I feel like all that money I blew at the mall when I got those modeling photos taken, I never got a call or anything, but I think I got shystered on that one. Guy said he could put me in some films. I was like, wow.
So, Laurie, I think you've told us before, you've written and published 10 fiction books, and 2 that are industry specific. So you're in group benefits, and you've got 2 industry driven books. Is there a place to find these? Is there a way to promote them, or do you have a website, or how do we get in touch?
Find me on Amazon, both .com and .ca. So the list of the books are there. There's also, a couple little children's books that I put in when the kids were little, and you get inspired by that. So I don't include those in my fiction novels, but they can find them there. Laurie Power Writer is my website that I use for promoting the writing. But having a lot of fun with my latest industry book on They'll Never Know. It's all about insurance crime. And I'll tell you, some of the stuff I'm coming across, I probably have 30 books in the works just from true crime stories in insurance. It's just outrageous.
Really? So an insurance fraud, basically.
Yeah, insurance fraud, different insurance crime, different ways that people try to take advantage of insurance and feeling compelled to do so, right? Like insurance is one of those things that people feel that's okay to do.
They owe me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the murders are outrageous. Has anybody ever told you about Michael Malloy? Okay, this guy, I got to tell you. I know you don't have time, but I'll tell you anyway.
We got time.
Okay, so Michael Malloy was an Irishman in the 1930s, okay? And he was, I guess, a bit of a bum. I won't go into a lot of details, but he started hanging out at this speakeasy. And these guys became known as the Murder Squad, right? So anyway, I forget what specifically they were called, but they decided they were going to take out insurance policies on Michael Malloy because the speakeasy needed the money. So they figured, he's a drunk, he's not going to last very long anyway. Let's take out a couple insurance policies and we'll make sure he dies. So they started giving him wood alcohol instead of whiskey or whatever else you might serve. That's okay. Michael Malloy, like a good Irishman that he was, drank that down and asked for more. They made him sandwiches made where they sprinkled in tin and glass. I know you're thinking this isn't true. It's absolutely true and well documented.
Like, is this a joke? Where are we going with this?
And he lived through that.
This is the first steroid.
They tried to freeze him. They covered him. They got him drunk till he passed out. They doused him with water and put him out in the winter trying to get him to have hypothermia. Eventually they did kill him, but and then since they were caught. But those are the heights of crazy insurance stories that are out there.
Those are the fun ones. The boring ones are the, put life insurance on your spouse 3 days before something happens to them. Like,
that's done so often.
I know. There's not a lot of foresight going on there. That's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you one more. One more is a couple down in Texas. They were young. I got to blame it on their age. They decided they had 2 little kids. They decided they needed to cash in on the money. So they exhumed a body out of the graveyard, and they thought they were doing good because it was an older person. So they put that person in the car, drove the car over the cliff, set the vehicle on fire, claimed it was her husband who had died. Problem number 1, the body was female.
Wow, I guess when you exhume a body, you really don't know unless that's your specialty.
Well, you could have read the headstone, though.
Yeah, well, that might have helped too. Yeah. What happens if it's got like 2 names on it?
Something.
Stay away from the 2-name headstones.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, my wife definitely listens to the true crime podcast all the time. And, I got to say there's some pretty bizarre stuff she listens to, except she falls asleep to it. So I get stuck listening to it. And then so the next night, she'll start it halfway through because she didn't catch the last half. Of course, I'm in bed going, and then he does this. So I listen to these things twice or 3 times sometimes. And I'm like, oh, no. Here we go.
I'd watch yourself there, Dave. You don't know what ideas are coming in.
She could be scheming. That's I'm worried. I'm worried now.
I'm worried that if somebody ever takes my computer and looks at my search history, I'm like, I'm going down.
That's right. Just don't touch your husband or do anything to him. Hopefully he passes in natural causes and it's not got your fingerprints anywhere around it.
True enough.
And now that this is recorded,
at my door, I'll go, okay, here I go.
That's right. Yeah, I T-boned a car 35 years ago. That's all I've ever done. I even reported it. Nice.
Well, we've taken enough of your time, I think, today, Lori, and we want to thank you, of course, for your support and coming on the Smokin Bulls podcast and joining us today.
Name.
So thanks for joining us, Lori.
You guys
thanks,
have
Lori.
a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Smokin Bulls, the podcast about business, money, and lifestyle. You can find out more about us at smokinbulls.com or follow us on our social media.